Hey, this is Ty Trumbull from Acquira. We like to celebrate anytime one of our acquisition entrepreneurs closes on a deal. It's such a long process from beginning to sign up for the Accelerator program all the way through LOI and negotiations to the actual final close. It's a really big deal, and we like to celebrate. So Kevin Couper is one of our AEs who just recently closed on a deal in Florida, and we wanted to talk to him about his experience working with Acquira, his experience going through the deal, and any advice he has for fellow AEs. So here's our conversation. Congratulations on the business.
Thank you.
Yeah. Could you tell me a bit about the deal?
Sure. Yeah. So it's been a wild ride. It was actually the second LOI I issued. The first one kind of went sideways. This one is it's a plumbing company. It's about 22 employees. They do about 60% commercial, 40% residential. I live in South Florida in West Palm Beach. So this is actually about 35 minutes from me, thankfully. So I just it's a super easy commute. So it was easy for me to do research on them and kind of go back and forth. So really, really well-established business. The owner was selling just unfortunately because he has cancer and he wants to retire and slow down so he can just kind of focus on his health. So it was actually, bittersweet kind of thing, but we get along very well. And it's been a very, very positive experience in working with them. I'm probably about 2 weeks in right now.
Nice. When was the closing date?
June 5th.
Nice. And how was the whole process going back and forth with the seller and everything? I know that can cause a lot of contention at certain points.
Yeah, so actually, I didn't really have a lot of engagement with the seller. It was really more the broker because they were both very good. The broker just kind of wanted to run with everything and kind of shield the seller from just a lot of questions that I had, right? So the broker did a very good job there. So in the beginning, I really just built a good relationship with him. And then towards the end is when I really got into working with the seller, which that was kind of interesting because as things kind of came to the wire, there were some negotiating that came up. And that's when we really started to bond because we both got a good taste of what our business sense was, right? As far as meeting in the middle and just being very rational and not nickel and diming each other. So it was just a really good exchange there.
Mm-hmm. And how long was the entire process from like signing up with Acquira to actually closing on the deal?
I would say it was probably about 9 months for me from start to finish. So again, I wasted probably 2 months on a deal that just kind of went sideways because it went sideways early because the numbers just weren't what they said they were. So thankfully, I didn't really waste too much time. So that wasted about 2 months, but probably 9 months from start to finish. Which once I signed the LOI, I think it took about 3 months to close the deal, a little bit over for this one.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the deal that went sideways? Like what went sideways, I guess, specifically?
Yeah, honestly, just incompetence on the broker side. I met the same thing. It was a flooring company 30 minutes west of where I live. They were saying they had $1 million in SDE over the last 2 years. They wanted 3-ish million for it, similar size to the company that I just bought. And I was waiting for a while just to kind of get the tax returns, the updated P&Ls and the financial data, which is what I started with, so they wanted an LOI. So I put that in place first. And then I just started seeing some discrepancies. So when they finally sent me the data, because they wouldn't send tax returns up front without an LOI, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. So once I saw them, it was clear that the numbers were way off. And when I had gone back to the broker, he had really kind of blamed the third party that put together the deck, that I was looking at, because the deck looked great. Tons of detail through whatever provider he used, but he literally didn't even cross-reference. He didn't do his job at all. He didn't cross-reference the numbers. He just assumed it was good. So he had no answers for me. So it took me like literally a month, maybe 6 weeks just to get the right information. Once we verified the information, it was clear that it wasn't $1 million SDE. It was like 250 at best, 250,000. And we had already agreed on a 3x multiple of a $3 million kind of number. So that would have bumped the purchase price down to 750. No bank would have touched it. I wasn't going to touch it. It wasn't something I was interested in. So it was just a huge disconnect. And honestly, it was, I think they fired the broker after that because I saw the deal that somebody else reached out to me a few months later about the deal to ask me if I was interested, and the numbers were much less, because they were more accurate.
Right. It's funny how those brokers can really make or break a deal.
It was kind of shocking. The broker's response was, well, these things happen. And I was like, no, they don't actually. Like you just didn't do your job.
Mm-hmm. So how do you've closed on your deal finally. How do you feel?
I feel great, honestly. It's been 2 weeks. The first day is very kind of awkward, right? It was a bittersweet moment to just have that interaction, right? Because people were getting emotional with the owners, notifying them that they were retiring, which was a good sign though, because that shows that they've got a good relationship. So it was kind of awkward though, considering they've got this 30-year relationship with some people, and then I'm new. So it was a lot of changing, but then that was a huge, weight off of our shoulders once that was done after the first day. And then it was really just a matter of getting to know people and the system. So the first few days is kind of just really like drinking out of a fire hose, and it still is, but it's just gotten calmer. But now I'm kind of starting to get into a groove, starting to build some relationships, and work. It doesn't feel like work. It's very validating that the reasons why I went into this was for freedom and flexibility to have more fun on the entrepreneurial side, and that's coming true. So I'm putting in long hours, but I don't even mind it because I'm working for myself. And I think I underestimated the emotional aspect of it because we spent so much time on the business, the numbers. And then once you get in there, at least for my deal, I'm blessed to have a really solid management team in place, employees that really are very talented all around. So, and they're all very smart. So we've all been getting along very, very well so far. So that was a piece that I underestimated because I'm really building relationships with a lot of people. And that's also very time consuming. So I don't have a problem with that, but being in the office 24/7 during the week, everyone wants to get, in your ear and kind of build a relationship with you, which is great. I just underestimated that piece.
And you've sort of spoken a little bit about the business culture, but how were you able to sort of assess that before you actually closed on the deal? And what do you see now on the other side of the closing?
That's tough because for him, I was really trying to just gauge him. The broker was fantastic. So just as I got to know the broker, it's like, okay, well, clearly this seller has a good judge of character because he picked this guy. And then even working with his lawyer was very easy to deal with. So as I started to kind of assess that, you just kind of got a good feeling. I think for probably 2.5 months, I only spoke to the owner twice. Once was on the phone during a Zoom call, and then once during the on-site visit. And that's kind of where it was just eye contact. And it was just talking and getting to know one another briefly, where I was like, I was just trying to kind of guessing like, hey, I think this guy is a good guy. He seems trustworthy. You never really know for sure. It's just a feeling. But just even looking around his office, which is like 2,000 square feet or so, there's probably about 7 people in there on a daily basis. It's super organized and clean. He has two warehouses on site for inventory and water heaters and such, and a lot of trucks. Everything was super organized, super clean. So to me, I got the vibe that it was, a very well-ran operation. So it was just kind of a guess. And then I got to meet his wife before we closed, and then before we actually closed too, Brian Stroh from the ACE integration team, we made it mandatory. We had to fight tooth and nail for that because it's a small office. So I understand why, because they didn't want it to be awkward, and they didn't want to commit to introducing us to anybody without having the deal finalized, which I understood. But I'd also said, well, listen, if we're going to pay you $3 million for this, then we really have to do this. So Brian went in and he met with the owner and his wife. They had lunch for a couple hours. He got to kind of walk around the office and just see the vibe and the culture there. So he reported all positive thoughts back to me, which was very comforting.
That's great. And what did you take away from the whole Acquira experience?
Honestly, it's so good all around. Honestly, I was always trying to, my background's in finance, and I've always been entrepreneurial and on the business development side. And I've always wanted to start a business or buy a business. I just didn't know where to go. So they actually just provide the framework, the resources to do that. Without them, I wouldn't have been able to finalize it, because there's just so many things that you don't know from start to finish with the deal. And then even if you can close the deal, having the ACE people in there to help from day one it's only been 2 weeks, but it's just so comforting that you have a partner that you can go to with questions and issues, and they've already seen most of it. So just having that there makes it that much more comfortable. Otherwise, if I was just on my own, I probably wouldn't have made it through that, to the deal at the end, because so many things pop up when you're negotiating with the bank, your lawyer, their lawyer, the broker, the seller's key employee issues. There's so many things that come up that you just don't know how to handle it. And, Acquira was just really on call essentially throughout the entire process to help walk through ways around it and stuff. So it's been great. The hardest part for me was just managing my emotions, because you get very excited. You're like super close to getting away from your W-2 and owning your business. And then everything looks great. And then all of a sudden, some wrench gets thrown in the mix, and you're like, oh, no, the deal's going to die. And then the next day it's like, no, we're in a good spot. And it's a lot of back and forth. So the hardest part was just kind of managing your emotions, not getting too excited or too upset, and just trying to really just be rational and patient throughout the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's crazy the amount that your emotions can play into the deal, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're doing ACE and everything after that. I know it's pretty early days, but how's that process?
It's been awesome, because we timed it up very well, thankfully, because closing got pushed a couple times, and that's kind of frustrating for people on all sides, especially when you're trying to organize people to fly in and be there. So thankfully, for the first day of the announcement of the change in ownership, they were there with me. So it was just good to have them there as support, but also it was just really good, because it's good to have feedback. We kind of talked about what we were going to say, and a lot of it was just changed on the fly, because the owners kind of came in and said, hey, I would focus on, these 3 items. So we just kind of changed on the fly. But even, there's a lot of people to talk to. So they were there for about 2 days, I believe. And just having, 3 of us basically go around and talk to people. They were able to do some ride-alongs, check out some jobs. So we were able to cover a lot more ground, because it's a very sensitive time for a lot of the people, like what's going to go on. Everyone's scared about their job. So we really just kind of had to validate that, hey, your jobs are safe. In my area, there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions going on, where you've got some venture capitalists and private equity groups scooping these companies up, and they're just pulling them apart, and a lot of people are leaving or losing their jobs. So they were really scared about that. So it was just, we handled a lot more up front than I would have ever been able to do, and just kind of focusing on, like, we've already got the bookkeeper. We've had 2 calls on the finances to kind of get more insight into there, because I'm kind of flying blind right now. The way they just look at like high level stuff. So they have the data. It's just not in a way that, I would prefer to see it and manage the business. So we're already working on getting clarity there. We're also already looking for a people and culture hire. They have an HR person there, but so that helps, right? They've got like half that battle done. So we've already accomplished a lot in a short period of time, and just having them there as an additional resource on a weekly basis. As far as the hard part, once you actually close, is, if you're all of us in this AE program, you have so many things you want to change. You really have to be slow and mindful about overwhelming people. So it's really just kind of keeping notes of things and focusing on the larger items that you want to change, but then also getting buy-in from the employees, so you can really plan and get things done. So I think that they're very good and methodical and rational about how to frame those things and what types of conversations to have, and the management staff. That's huge too. Who's going to be on your leadership team, right? So kind of identifying those people up front, interviewing them, seeing what their motivations are. And they help really identify some small things to change, which some small wins that take you a long way. For example, there's a guy that works in the warehouse. It's very hot in there. And he asked if he could wear shorts. And instead of wearing cotton t-shirts, could he get like the dry tech fit? And I was like, absolutely. And like his jaw like dropped. It was like Christmas morning for him. Like super easy things like that. Just little changes like that. So people, and you start to see that 2 weeks in, people start to see those things, people talk, and they start to sense like those are just small things that are easy for us to change, but they just kind of fell on deaf ears, with the former management team.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And did you use the equity fund for the deal?
I did.
Nice. How was that whole process?
Super smooth. It was just an extension of, the investment committee, and really not much of a heavy lift beyond that. I mean, they were just kind of validating certain things and structures, and then it's just you kind of keep them in the loop as you're going through the closing process. And it was very easy working with the lawyers, getting whatever documents we need coordinated, funding everything. So, and it was also just validating because if they were, the investment committee meeting is one thing, but then having them actually agree with it once you get all the diligence back is also validating that if they're interested in co-investing, then it just kind of helps you feel good mentally that you chose a good business. But administratively, it was super simple.
Nice. And I guess just finally, what advice would you give to other AEs that haven't got to the close yet?
It literally takes a village. I know that sounds cliche, but it's just try to be mindful of personalities, because you can't snap on people. You got to really be creative about, mindful of people's time, how they communicate. Like, if don't just rely on email, try to set up a phone call, set up a meeting if you can. And you really just got to be patient and try to balance your emotions. I mean, I had my lawyer, their lawyer, then you had a key employee that brought in some other lawyer that was not easy to work with, like at the last minute. So there's a lot of things that will come up along the way. So I would say just stick to your guns as far as what really matters, and try not to get caught up in the smaller things. You don't want to be nickel and diming each other back and forth, but yeah. And the broker's huge too, because if the broker's competent and cares, they're obviously representing the seller, but yeah, if you can get somebody that you feel is like a good person, they've got a good reputation, just be mindful and patient throughout the process. That you're managing so many people, and then you've got like the quality of earnings person comes in at one point, and then the bank comes in. I would say the one thing the broker had told me was at some point you've got to manage your advisors. There's a lot of us are very analytical, and sometimes it's easy to get caught in the numbers, and you can get into this like black hole of just data collecting, and there will be fatigue on the seller and the broker side. So sometimes there's things that people are asking for, and it's really not needed, and it's really not necessary. So at some point, I would say try to back away from the analytics, talk to your advisors and say, like, what do we really need? Let's focus on that, because if we don't really need these other details, let's not burn any bridges here. And try to just fundamentally look at the business too, rather than just get stuck in an analytical hole. Does this really matter? Do we need to know this? Some of it is kind of guessing. You're validating some numbers with the quality of earnings and stuff, but just try to be mindful of, aggregating your questions together. So sometimes you might have to wait a day or two to get some questions from certain vendors that you're using. But if you can try to consolidate stuff and limit the amount of times you're going back and forth, there's just so many things that, so many questions that everyone has. Trying to manage that process and the people is very important.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to end, unless you have any other final thoughts.
I think that's pretty much it.
Awesome, man. Well, congratulations again.
Thanks, Ty.
Congratulations again to Kevin. Kevin, like all of our acquisition entrepreneurs, started with Acquira through our Accelerator program. If you'd like to start your own business buying journey, that's where it begins. Sign up for the Accelerator through the link on this page, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much for your time.